Hi, my name is Dr. Ariel Schwartz, and if we haven't practiced before, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm also have been a yoga teacher for over 25 years. I am the author of Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma Recovery and really emphasize the polyvagal theory and integration of that into yoga by attending to our nervous systems and really cultivating greater resilience through more nervous system flexibility, which means that we don't get stuck in high alert states and we don't get stuck feeling shut down and fatigued, that we can move relatively fluidly between a range of nervous system states. So this shorter class that I want to share with you today is called Riding the Waves. And you'll find out movement-wise why we're calling that, because we're going to focus on undulating movements through the spine. And I really emphasize in this class how challenging our modern life can be and the world that we're living in, and that there's kind of a constant source of information coming into our nervous systems that we're trying to navigate. And sometimes those are threats, and or they can feel like threats, even if they aren't. And so we're wanting to really work with what can we facilitate and call upon internally that allows us to ride those waves of change with greater equanimity. Sometimes we define equanimity with this understanding that it's the ability to stand in the middle of all that stuff that's happening, right? It's the eye of the hurricane, the clarity in the chaos. So that's the offering for this through movement of what is it like to feel yourself in movement? And of course, then how does that inform you in stillness? So I'll shift onto my mat and I will invite you to do the same. And you don't need any props for this particular class, but I will encourage you to just find whatever you need for you to be comfortable for this time. And as we arrive, an opportunity to tune into what are you noticing in your body? How is your breath moving, or is there any constriction with your breath today? Is there any emotions that are percolating or moving as their own waves within you? And how might you best support that part of yourself, that emotional body? And then from here, we're going to begin to just find some very gentle movements, focusing on the spine and some small rotations, upper body around your legs, allowing this to be a breath-centric practice. So you inhale as you come forward and exhale, maybe rounding your spine back. Good. And then we'll go the other way. So we're not staying in any of these movements for too long. So if there's any time that something I'm offering or suggesting doesn't feel right for you, for your body, know that you can opt out, you can adapt and modify, and that we'll be moving on to the next set of movements relatively quickly. So honoring and listening to yourself is always the foundation for a safe and nourishing practice. Okay. We're going to come to center, and this time we're going to find some movement of the spine, and I'll show this from the side. We're going to kind of undulate the spine in a wave-like motion in the seated position. And if you prefer to be up on a chair, that's totally fine too. Right? Just allowing yourself to kind of take the spine forward and back. And you can find that range of motion, and you might even explore how does it feel to initiate that movement from your tailbone, from your sits bones, or maybe you initiate it right from the center of the spine, right? What changes in the movement if you allow the kind of diaphragmatic and rib cage zone to initiate that movement? Maybe you initiate it from your chest, from your heart center. What happens if you initiate the wave from your throat? Or even from the crown of your head? And remember, there's no right or wrong way to do any of these movements. So if you're finding anything that feels kind of awkward, or what does she mean by that? Just feel it from the inside out. There's no way this is supposed to look, right? You might notice what it feels like to let the wave go from the base of the spine up or from the top of the spine down. And we'll take this waving motion now from side to side. So we can also move our spine in a sagittal direction and just allowing yourself to explore side to side. You might even kind of rock from one side of the pelvis to the other, one of your sits bones to the other. You can allow your low spine and rib cage and shoulders even to help articulate this motion. What happens if you let your head go? Maybe even let your voice go. And are you breathing? How does your breath support the movement? All right. Do you want to keep your hands kind of rooted on your thighs, which is where I have mine right now? Or maybe you let your arms come into the motion and mimicking those waves. And you might even let one hand stop to the floor, drop to the floor, and you can wave the other arm overhead. Lovely. And we'll come back to center. So most of our movement's going to be centered in the spine, but we'll bring the legs in for a little bit here as well. So inviting you to bring your legs out in front of you. And this time, just kind of waving your knees from side to side, like they're kind of rocking, and your whole body gets to rock with it. And it's up to you. You can have one or both hands on the floor for support. Right? You might even reach an arm overhead. And with all of these movements, you also get to play with pace, right? If anything I'm ever offering to you feels like it's too fast or too slow, adjust it, adapt it to meet your breath, your internal rhythm. How do you need to ride the waves of life around you so that you can maintain a connection to your inner through line, to your midline, to your inner light? And you might even play around with taking both hands off the earth. Again, you can find that wave-like motion in the arms. And this might also kind of light up that connection to your core. Beautiful. One more each side. And then to center. Okay. From here, an invitation to come all the way down onto your back. And just like we were doing seated, allowing your knees to continue to find some of that movement, and it will create a gentle twisting action. And I really mean to go for gentle here, a gentle twisting action around your pelvis, around your low spine. If at any point that feels uncomfortable for you, you can back off. I find it beneficial to explore this with the feet nice and wide, as wide as your yoga mat. And again, a little bit of action side to side. And you might even let the upper body start to respond like a kind of cat or who knows, your favorite animal, just waking up from a nap so that as the knees rock one way, the upper body might even kind of roll onto one shoulder. Your arm might reach overhead. Oh, that feels so good, right? And then eventually settling into stillness on your back. Maybe one hand on your belly, one hand over your heart. And a brief moment in stillness to sense the internal rhythms, the kind of vibration that is the result, the repercussions of the movement. And you're welcome to stay in stillness. And when you're ready, if you're ready to come into more movement, we'll find the spinal wave on our back. So pressing into your feet to lift your hips and then lower back down. And this is not so much about achieving any shape. Once again, we're really focusing on the movement in that wave. So you might roll the pelvis down towards the tailbone and then rolling the tailbone up, letting that kind of wave up into the spine as more of the vertebrae lift away from the earth. And you can even allow your arms to kind of mirror this movement. So they might come overhead as your hips lift and then lowering down to the earth, feeling that accentuated lumbar curve at the bottom. Lift and inhale, perhaps, and exhale, rolling down. Maybe even let that more of your spine lift in that lower position as well, so that you're kind of enhancing the wave in both directions. Lift the hips, and then as you lower, maybe you lift the low spine, maybe you even lift onto the top of your head, lifting your shoulders off. Wow, right? Just playing in the space you've created. Lifting your heart, perhaps. Okay. And next time you've arrived with your hips to the earth, settling your spine to the earth and pausing here, just letting yourself reside and feel supported. And from that place of support, drawing your knees in, hands behind your knees, and then we're going to rock and roll, rocking and rolling on your spine, just playful spaciousness, letting this be a feel-good self-massage, like a child rolling down a grassy hill. Just let it be fun. And eventually we're going to rock up and over your shins into a tabletop for a new home base. And always knowing that if you'd like to integrate for a moment, you can press your hips back. You can rest into child's pose. This is an option at any time, and maybe we all pause here for a moment, just settling, receiving, enjoying. And then pressing back through to hands and knees when you feel ready, when that feels supportive for you. And from hands and knees, a new position to explore your spinal wave, right? Just allowing yourself to Once again, kind of feel how you can initiate this from your pelvis, maybe from the mid-spine, your heart, your throat, or the crown of your head. And allow this to be kind of playful. You might even kind of rock a little bit back and forth between your heels and even past your hands. You might kind of imagine here that you're kind of riding a little Ferris wheel, and you can kind of ride it up and then down to the bottom and riding the breath. And you can go the other direction. You can kind of slither along the earth and then move through cat back towards child's pose and slither. It might even start to look like a little cobra pose as you're close to the earth on the bottom and then rolling back into table. One more like that. Beautiful. And then from our tabletop, a little bit of that side to side once again. So you can let your hips go from side to side, and you might let your rib cage follow and your shoulders follow, and your head lets go into this rocking motion, swaying side to side. Feeling how your weight shifts from one hand to the other. And then back through to center. One more option here is to come into barrel rolls. So now your hips will take a nice big circle, and then allow that circle to translate through your lumbar spine, through your rib cage, through your thoracic spine, even into your neck, your head. Remembering to breathe. And if you've gone one way, taking it the other direction. Lovely. And because that can be sometimes a lot for the nervous system to move and to breathe in such manner, perhaps taking a moment to press back either in child's pose or just sitting on your heels, resting your palms on your thighs. We have a little bit more movement to do, and you might say that was plenty, right? You might pause there for today, or just take the sacred pause before we go on together. If you'd like to continue, we're going to move back into our table shape, curling the toes under. And this time an invitation to press back into a downward facing dog. But rather than aiming for a static or even perfect downward facing dog, you can kind of guess where we're going into some wave-like undulations. So the invitation is to bend your knees and your hips towards your heels, and then rolling toward plank, and then back into that crouched downward dog. And it's like perhaps even the sensation that the back of your heart is the wave rolling to the shore. The head might lift at the end, and then you can fall back into the ocean. The next time we come forward into that plank, the invitation is to lower your knees, to bend at the elbows, and to lower all the way to the earth. You can widen your feet in this one, maybe out towards the edges of your mat once again, and maybe even wiggle your hips a little side to side. Hmm. And from here, the invitation is to find some radiating movement from your core out through to your periphery. You might start with some kind of undulations up into cobra and back down, and you get to choose that range of motion. You might even also explore how it feels to lift the feet off of the floor, right? Totally up to you. You might even take the hands off of the floor. Right? You can go back and forth between different variations. And when you feel ready, we will soften here for a moment, palm over palm, forehead resting on the backs of your hands, and then letting something go. You can even turn the toes out, let the heels drop in a little, let your shoulders soften, and receiving this belly down contact with the earth. From here, the invitation is to plant your hands under your shoulders. We're going to move through table, through downward facing dog, lifting the knees. And this time you can walk your feet forward or your hands back. We'll come into a forward fold and a few waves of your spine in and out of that shape. Lengthen and fold. Undulating here. You can keep the knees nice and bent, nourishing everything with soft awareness, nothing rigid here. And then eventually coming all the way up to standing, you can roll there, however you'd like to arrive in your standing shape. And a new relationship to gravity. What's happening for you here? How is your body informing? What has changed in this short time of practice? All right, a few more movements before we slow down and integrate. Our standing movements are going to continue with our theme of spinal wave. So we'll start with that kind of classic spinal wave here. And you might initiate in the pelvis and allow that to radiate up through the spine. You can see my knees are bent, making lots of mobilization into the legs, even the ankles, the hips. You can explore how it feels to initiate from the lumbar spine, your rib cage, your heart, your neck, even from your head. And what happens if you let your arms flow with the motion? Again, there's no right or wrong way to do any of this. We're going to come up through standing and we'll find our side to side, right? You can just imagine you're a seagrass or some kind of, palm tree blowing in the wind, whatever is going to support you here. You can let your hips really find this. You might snake it out a little, right? You can let your arms move, or maybe you want your arms nice and tight and close. Let it feel good. And then we've got some circular possibilities, right? So you might circle your hips in one direction. Notice how your whole body responds, right? They can be real small circles or larger circles. And going in both directions. Awesome. Okay. And then we'll be some kind of surfers for a little bit. So I'll invite you to widen your stance. And from that widened stance, we'll start side to side, just as we were, but just a wider base. You can kind of surf side to side. Now, we don't ever really learn how to surf the waves unless we're willing to get a little wet, right? Get in there, get a little messy. So might let your arms wave side to side. And then an invitation to turn to one side. And we're in a wide lunge, so you can even widen your feet if you need to, a nice wide base. And from that wide base, your mat's your surfboard, and just finding some of that mobility of your spine, your arms, with or without, right? If your feet are too close, you might feel like you're on a balance beam. That is a different feeling, and you can play with that too. But I like the wide feet, nice solid base here. And we're gonna come through center. We're gonna go the other way. Again, you can widen that base so feet are a little wider than hip widths apart, playing in the surf. And guess what? If you catch a big wave and you wobble and you fall, all's okay, right? It's all playtime here. And then back through center once again. This time, I'll invite you to step one foot in and the other, and just tune in. You can keep your knees soft, ankles soft. Noticing your breath and heart rate. And we'll take one final exploration before we go into a resting integration. And this final movement, I'll just invite you to flow with me back down to your mat. Long spine as you dive forward, finding inhale and halfway lift. And exhale, just to step into a downward facing dog. Maybe one more wave from this shape. And then lowering your knees to the earth. And you can keep your toes tucked under if you like for this next movement, or you can flatten the tops of the feet to the earth. So our next exploration is to explore the spinal wave from an ustrasana or a camel base. And I'm going to show this with the toes curled under to start. And we're just going to wave the spine up, lifting the hips away from the heels, and exhale back in. Inhale. Might open your arms, maybe lift your chin. And I'll show this with the toes untucked. Letting yourself feel that strength of your entire being, even the strength of your spine that can support now the opening of solar plexus and heart and throat. One more just like that. Let it open, receive, and then exhale. Let yourself simply be. So I'll offer our integration in a seated stillness, perhaps sitting on your heels, perhaps palms resting on your thighs. If that's too much in any way, shifting to sitting cross-legged. in whichever shape you choose. Really allowing yourself to take all of the energy that you've generated and give that to yourself. Maybe once again, a palm over your belly and a palm over your heart, or palm over your heart. Maybe your eyes soften into a more inward gaze. Nourishing yourself with your own sweet awareness and attention. And perhaps cultivating an image that for you calls you to center, that you know that with all that's happening in our lives, in our world, that you have a place to call home and to come home to. You might imagine a flower, your own favorite flower, just blooming at the center of your being. With great gratitude for you taking the time to give this to yourself and to allow me to be your guide. Thank you for taking this time for your practice. Wishing you a most wonderful day.